Hi, this is probably one of the hardest kind of review videos I've ever produced, and it's my third or fourth attempt to talk about the Delter Coffee Press. And I very much have a love-hate relationship with this piece of brewing kit, and I'll explain why in this video. Now, I really dislike this Delter. I'm not sure how I feel about this one. I'll explain what I mean by that. A couple of years ago, when the Delter first came on the market, a couple of my colleagues here at work said we must get one, we must try it out, it's the next big thing, it's a new kid on the block, it makes fantastic coffee. So I bought this Delter Coffee Press. And from the get-go, I was not impressed by the coffee it made. I felt it was really under-extracted all the time. No matter what I did, the coffee tasted under-extracted. Some brews were really nice, and that's because they tasted lighter, they tasted a little bit more floral, lightly fruity, quite clean, and that's because they were under-extracting in a particular window that actually coffee can still taste okay, even though it's under-extracted. And that window's quite small, so I often found that it was hit and miss. So the Delter was neglected and pushed into the back of the cupboard. And a couple of months later, I'd feel like maybe I didn't give it justice or do it justice. I should get it out again and have another go. Invariably, the results were the same. And more recently, I've really tried hard to improve my coffee brewing using this particular piece of kit. And again, failed time and time again. At the end of my tether, I tried one last thing. I bought a different one. And immediately, since doing that, I've been brewing great coffee. Turns out, for some reason, there's something wrong with this particular Delter. Now, I do think the Delter is misunderstood, and I put my hand up and say I misunderstood it the first time as well. It looks like an AeroPress, it presents itself like an AeroPress, and if you're anything like me who don't read instructions, then you'll immediately use it like an AeroPress. No, that's not how it functions. The AeroPress uses the pressure of air to force the water through the coffee. This is different. It works differently. That pressure, that press, is actually making the water engage with the coffee. If you don't press, the water does not get anywhere near the coffee. There is a rubber membrane between the water and the coffee, and it's the pressing that opens up that membrane and allows the water to get onto the coffee and to extract. It works very differently. You need to approach it very differently. And a lot of people, I've seen videos and reviews, knock the Delter because they see it as a bit of an AeroPress ripoff. I think that's the wrong approach to take with it. I think it's probably taken its inspiration from the AeroPress, and that's fine. I run a business. I take my inspiration for what my business does from other coffee roasters, and I just adapt what I see to make it conform to my ideas. And I think that's what's happened here. Someone's seen the AeroPress, seen something slightly different, and merged the two of them. There are some things I quite like about this coffee brewer, so I'm going to get going and get a brew going while I talk about what I do like and what I don't like about it. And I'm going through the same process broadly that I would for an AeroPress. I'm warming my brewing vessel up here and I'm wetting the filter paper. And now I'm dosing the coffee, but the coffee's going to get dosed into the brewer itself. And I'm going for a ratio of 12 grams of coffee to 200 mils of water. And here's the bit I like about the Delter. There's a measuring scale on the side of the vessel. So if you don't really want to use scales, I've got scales here to use as well. You don't need to. You can just use the measuring scale and very simply pour water in. And if you want 200 mils, there is a nice 200 mil line to go through. And it's broadly accurate. Bang on 200 mils, and I'm reading 196 on my scales. Now, those monks who are eagle-eyed will realise I'm not actually brewing onto anything. I put my water in, and there is no water coming out of the Delter. And this is that key thing about it. There is a membrane at this moment between the water and the coffee. No brewing is happening at the moment. I can get rid of my scales. I've got my water, I've got my coffee in this single unit. I can place it in my brewing vessel and still we're not brewing. And what I want to do is I want to start adding some water to the brew. And I kind of charge the Delter, and I'm going to put about 50 mils of water in. And by lifting the plunger, you're charging it, you're getting it ready, you're preparing 50 mils. And it's only when you start to gently plunge do you force the water through the membrane and allow the water and coffee to combine. And you want a nice, slow, gentle pressure. I'm going to let that blues for about 40 seconds before we add more water. And the thing about this is you can keep adding water, and this is where it works quite well. Another feature I like, you can do big brews. I've got 12 grams of coffee to 200 mils of water here. I could double the amount of coffee, and I could keep adding water by taking the lid off, putting more water in, and you can produce bigger brews of coffee. In we go again, and we're going to put 100 mils in this time. And I'm going to plunge really slowly and gently. I tend to find around about a 2-minute total brew time is what we're aiming for. So it's a very gentle plunge. What's important to realise is the contact time of the water is quite short. It's going in, it's touching the coffee, it's going straight the way through. There's not a lot of contact time, therefore you need to push quite gently to slow, I believe, the whole brew process down. You also need a slightly finer grind as well. Something that's in the filter range, but probably the finer end of a filter range. And here's one of the things that belongs in the dislike column. Something I dislike about the Delter is I find it's a monotonous thing to brew with. All I'm doing is lifting a plunger and gently pressing down. Some would argue that's similar to the AeroPress. I'd argue not, it's different somehow. It's hard to explain. It feels quite monotonous, just gently, carefully plunging down and trying to manage my plunge pressure over 2 minutes. It feels like I'm detached from the coffee somehow. I can't see what's going on. I can't see the water engaging. And when I'm brewing by hand like this, that's part of the enjoyment for me. A V60 really immerses me in the brewing experience. I can see what's happening. I can see the flow. I can see what's happening in the cone. I get a sense of how the water and the coffee are behaving. With this, I've kind of got to rely on how it's going to taste at the end and try and adapt my approach later on. The filter papers are almost identical to AeroPress filter papers, and an AeroPress owner, there may be a fit in my life for a brew of this nature, but it means yet another filter paper to own. The AeroPress don't fit in here, they're too big. These are too small to fit in an AeroPress. It's kind of a little bit frustrating. And the other thing that I dislike about it is the cleaning. It just is a little bit more clunky, a little bit more dirty than other coffee brewers. So a V60, that kind of thing, you can just pull the paper out, chuck it away, give it a rinse. The AeroPress is known to just be very, very clean. It's just not as good as other coffee brewers. To be fair, it's a neat idea. It's a compact design. It will brew larger batches, and that's a great feature if there's a few of you going out on a camping trip or traveling together. You can actually produce 3-4 cups out of this, where something like the AeroPress doesn't quite work the same. However, for me personally, that disconnect, that difficulty of judging what's going on in the brew and having to kind of brew a coffee and think how about I can adapt it based upon taste and flavour, just means that it's not going to suit me personally. If you've got any thoughts, comments or questions about the Delter or any other brewing method, or you'd like me to feature something that I haven't touched upon in my videos yet, please feel free to get in touch. Love reading your comments, and I always make sure I respond. Thanks again for your likes and for your subscribes. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.